Thank you for joining us today at AIPH Green City Briefing, Seeding a Sense of Place in Urban Parks. I'm Francesca Boyd and I'm part of the Green City team here at AIPH. Green City projects come in all shapes and sizes, but they all have one thing in common: the incredible power of plants to transform space and lives. Throughout this 2024-25 briefing series, we will hear from experts and those putting into practice the incredible difference that plants can make to our urban environments. Before we delve into the topic, please could I take the opportunity to remind you of how today's webinar is going to run. First, I will introduce the MC, and this will be followed by our first speaker, after which we will then have our second speaker, followed by the move to a discussion section. This is the point, this is your opportunity to ask questions and contribute to the discussion. So as the presentations progress, please do add your question through the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Worshipful Company of Gardeners for their continued support of the AIPH Green City Briefing programme. Please do take time to find out more about this unique organisation, including by viewing our earlier briefing series, which featured the work of the company based in London. And finally, stay up to date with the latest news, projects, research and initiatives from around the world with the AIPH Green City Global Update. The July issue is going to be released soon, so sign up now to make sure you don't miss it. Now, without further delay, may I introduce our MC for today's webinar. Jayne Miller is founder and CEO of Jayne Miller Consulting and principal at PRSO Consulting. Her consultancy work focuses on advancing equity in parks and recreation and supporting the urban park systems. Prior to shifting to consultancy in 2020, Jayne served as president and CEO of the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy in Pittsburgh. Under Jayne's leadership, the Pittsburgh Park Conservatory won many awards for the work, such as Restoring Pittsburgh's Park Initiative. Amongst other impressive work for recreation and parks in America, Jayne has also been involved in the creation of 20-year neighborhood park plans, something so important when you are able to bring everybody together. Currently, Jayne serves as board chair of the World Urban Parks, CAPRA commissioner, and is an American Academy and Parks and Recreation Administration and Salzburg Global Seminar Fellow. Really quite an impressive resume you have there, Jayne, and such an honour to have you with us here today. Thank you for being our MC. Now, over to you.
Frankie, thanks so much. And it's an honor for me to once again partner with AIPH to host this webinar. And today's webinar, as Frankie said, is about seeding a sense of place in urban parks. The purpose of today's webinar, you'll learn how to discover how plants and planting can create a sense of place in urban parks. The use and engagement of urban parks is intrinsically linked to how people feel when they are there. Plants play an important role in showing local habitat, creating and changing the seasons, and providing a sense of identity to an area. We have two outstanding speakers with us today, and I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Andrew Grant from Grant Associates. Andrew's work is based on sustainable landscape architecture and ecological placemaking. Andrew led the multidisciplinary design team for the Gardens by the Bay in Singapore. This 54-hectare public park has won multiple international design awards and featured in David Attenborough's Planet Earth. Andrew is a member of the UK's National Infrastructure Commission Design Group, a member of the Bath World Heritage Site Advisory Board, co-founder of the Forest of Imagination project in Bath, and chair of the Bathscape Landscape Partnership. In 2003, he was awarded an honorary Doctor of Letters by Bath Spa University in recognition for his outstanding work as a landscape architect and his passion and approach to nature and creativity and imagination. Andrew, I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar and very much looking forward to what you're going to be sharing with us.
Jayne, fantastic. Thank you very much. I am going to share a few projects from the work we've been doing, not necessarily all urban parks, but all very much engaging with public and experiences. And I'm going to show how plants have played a major role in the conceptual development of those and steering the ultimate identity and placemaking aspect of that. So I'm going to start with Gardens by the Bay because that's been a very significant project for me personally. Gardens by the Bay, we started that in 2006, and it came about as an international competition because the National Park Board of Singapore wanted to create effectively a new botanic garden, a showcase for plants. The whole structure of the brief was about, let's show off plants to the wider world. Let's bring plants to Singapore that they don't have, and let's showcase the beauty of the tropical landscapes. And so how you begin to think about that is quite interesting, and you know, there were lots of competitors all challenged with the same idea. How do we start the idea of showcasing plants in such a significant way? And this is my first sketch way back in 2006, where I thought it'd be really interesting to capture the narrative of Singapore using the orchid as a metaphor, effectively. The orchid being the national flower of Singapore, and incredibly cosmopolitan. It's probably the most common genus across the planet in terms of where it exists. And it has two really interesting factors which I thought were interesting for this project. One was it is incredibly clever at surviving in hostile places. So the infrastructure of the plant, the physiology of the plant to sustain itself, often as an epiphytic species, suggested to me that there was something interesting to do with the infrastructure. How do we showcase the life support system of this project in an interesting way? And then obviously with the orchid, you have the most beautiful flowers, and they became the reference for the gardens, the distribution of gardens, and the stems became a metaphor for the path network. So that set the scene for what was to become a really interesting design dialogue, because lots of these projects, they demand a really careful collaboration between lots of different people. And this is showing now is an early competition stage diagram where we thought, for this project, not only are we just going to showcase plants, let's showcase some other aspects of sustainability and how we need to think about managing our future urban spaces. So this was trying to capture the idea that we wanted to really explore how we could create an ecosystem here that started to make connections between different parts of the story. I won't explain it all, but suffice to say that through this process and working very cleverly with the engineers, we managed to develop strategies for making the glass houses, which are basically cooled glass houses in the tropics, zero carbon in operation, and to find really interesting ways of utilizing the landscape infrastructure to sustain the built infrastructure, and et cetera, et cetera. So really important sort of part of the whole project. And this is a master plan, one of the many evolving master plans for the gardens. It's 54 hectares in area. And if I sort of, the super tree grove is in the middle, then we've got the two biomes, the cloud forest, which is effectively Mediterranean plants, and so the flower dome, Mediterranean plants, the cloud forest, which is tropical montane species. And then you'll start to see there's a number of gardens all distributed around it. And it was really important for us to sort of establish some thematic framework for how we wanted to showcase the plants. So in essence, in this diagram here, the red area is the areas where we develop plants that had a significance for people. Is what we call the plants and people area, where it was really very much picking the sort of cultures of Singapore and creating gardens around those: India, China, Malaysia, and Western. whereas the pale green is really about plants on the planet. It's basically just thinking about all of the qualities and beauty of plants that we find everywhere. And the darker green was really then taking that off into what we call the fragile forest, which was basically representing the plants of Southeast Asia, and particularly those which are rare and endangered. And right through the center, this idea that we could really showcase the fusion of our appreciation of plants, how we can use technology, and how we can show the multiple benefits of plants in our contemporary world. And they became particularly represented by the super trees, which are slightly hidden in here, but this starts to show the impact of the gardens as a sort of a place where plants are the key element. Yes, there are the amazing structures, but when you are there, you are immersed in the most diverse planting experience. And the client was very keen that it did become a botanic garden. I mean, there's different numbers depending where you look in terms of how many species there are, but there are certainly over 1.5 million plants representing probably 6,000 or 7,000 species that are really of great interest. So to do this, to showcase the plants, we developed lots of techniques. And in terms of the super trees, which there are sort of 18 of those, which vary from 50 meters high to 25 meters high, we wanted everyone to have its own planting personality. So we developed strategies for different ways of supporting planting on these structures, whether they are the talanses, which are literally just cable tied onto a structure, all the way through to more elaborate structures for the orchids and the likes. But principally, most of the plants here are bromeliads and the likes, and supplemented by incredibly vigorous climbing plants. So every tree has its own personality. And at night, the whole experience goes from the lovely tropical garden experience of the day into a very magical experience at night. We had the same issue inside the biomes. How do we showcase the plants? I'm just going to focus on the cloud forest, because what we're really trying to do is get across the idea of how do we experience the plants that grow on a tropical mountain several thousand meters high, and showcase the variety of zones that you can go up through there, and the canopy type levels, and the lost worlds with the upper tops of the mountains with the pitcher plants and the likes. And so this is just showing how we created an artificial mountain at the heart of the biome, within which we could start to showcase lots of different aspects of the plants and have black box theaters explaining that. But the outer skin is effectively, it's effectively a concrete skin with a living render on it, which is then clothed entirely in plants, but there's lots of windows and gaps in this to sort of allow views in and out and the likes. So this is the first view you get of the mountain when you enter the cloud forest biome. These waterfalls are about 35 to 40 meters high, depending if you count the pit below, but you can see that structure is entirely covered in plants in an extraordinary way. So this is one of those things where you can use plants and water just to create incredible wow moments, and everybody who comes into this space, or I would say 90%, just go wow, and then they start taking photos. But once again, I mean, the techniques that we use to try and find different ways of creating different niches on this structure are sort of represented here, either embedded within the fabric, the concrete skin of this, creating planters for larger species that can pop out, all the way through to epiphytes and obviously plants that can just be held onto the surface. And you can see in some of these lots and lots of little pockets. So it's quite an extraordinary thing to see before it was planted up, but this is it now. you can get close to the plants, you can sort of walk around and between them on aerial walkways, you see them from above and below. And it is quite an extraordinary way to think about it. And I think we could do more in cities to really think about how do we really showcase the spectacle of plants in interesting ways. And not just during the day, but actually at night as well, thinking about the lighting experience. Here it's emphasized by the fact that we have the misting device to keep the moisture levels high, the humidity levels high. So that was one where plants were basically the brief. This is a different project. It's the Tower of London Super Bloom, which happened in 2022, but actually it has been recurring every year since because of the way we used annual flowers. So they have effectively self-seeded and created a visual spectacle for people passing through or wanting to go through the moat. So this is the Tower of London. The crown jewels are here, and in 2022, the Historic Royal Palaces decided it'd be really good if they could do something for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And eventually, after lots of thinking, the idea was that we would turn the moat into this immersive flowering experience. And you would come in, if you wanted, on a big slide, and then you would walk through the moat, looking across to these amazing walls, getting close to the walls, and going through a gently sort of modeled new landscape, but which was all sort of seeded with a mix of annuals. And as you can see, the intent was that as you moved around the tower, you would get different experiences, different colorways, different color experiences, different three-dimensional experiences, until you left the moat at the bottom end. So this was effectively the condition of the moat from the mid-19th century, when the moat was ordered to be drained. And it was pretty dire. I mean, it served as a sort of a playground for pop-up festivals and the likes, but by and large, it was a barren piece of grassland. And during the summer of 22, I mean, it transformed into a really extraordinary display, changing display of these flowers. And it sort of attracted many thousands of people to come through and walk through it, experience it. And lots of lessons were learned about how this space performed in terms of its microclimate and everything else, but also how this space could be transformational in terms of how people perceive the Tower of London. So using plants as a sort of a identifier and a changing transitional symbol of how people have started to manage space, I think is quite an interesting concept. From this, which was meant to be just a sort of a pop-up temporary solution, Historic Royal Palaces are now thinking about, okay, well, how do we create a long-term experience here, which is much more resilient, it's more year-round experience, it has more biodiversity value, it reintroduces water and all of those sort of aspects to it. So watch this space for another really amazing use of plants in the future. I'll just try and cut through a couple more projects. Once again, not an urban park, but a very significant landscape project in Bangalore. This is the Kempegowda International Airport and the Terminal 2, which was opened just earlier this year. The architects are SOM from the States. And the client was very clear from the beginning that he wanted this to be a terminal in a garden, and to sort of capture the traditional image of Bangalore as the garden city of India. And we worked very closely with the architects and the client and the engineers to figure out how we could do that in a way that met all of the operational aspects of an airport, security, etc., etc. But through that, we began to introduce some really extraordinary infrastructure that you can see here. These sort of hanging bell structures which are planted, and they continue all the way through the This is the checking hall, really. And the intent was to sort of make sure that landscape was a feature of every part of your journey through here. This is my sketch, which started to say, we're going to wrap this terminal in a belt of sort of Karnataka forest typologies, and through the journey we will pass through a number of really interesting landscape planted experiences, both at check-in, through the security, through the retail, and as to get to the gates. So this is the view looking towards the security, using green and all these sort of biophilic elements to try and reinforce that, just calm everything down. Some water in there. So rather than just looking through to a duty-free retail area, you go through a garden when you've been through security. And lots of places to sit, lots of places to just have been absorbed by the greening. And in the spaces outside the core terminal area, towards the gates, you pass through this forest belt landscape, which is quite extraordinarily rich in local species. In fact, the client went from just thinking, okay, we'll make it a forest. They decided they were going to start to collect rare species of the local environment. So it's now become effectively its own botanic garden. And inside, the experience of dining and shopping is just complemented by this, planted experience. As I say, all the way you go through, you have that sense of planting and contact with natural elements. And I think planting and water, you'll see that's been a consistent theme in these projects, is really an important part of how do we add the magic to planted experiences. Just got probably one more minute, so I'm just going to sort of flip through. This is a recent project in the UK. It's a little almshouse, 57 flats for elderly people, and supported by a charity. And it's really about how do we use plants to just very simply sustain the quality of life for these people. And basically the building effectively creates a courtyard, and this area is higher, and the sunken courtyard in the heart, which is basically looked into by everybody. Then this is a roof garden, which is effectively a food growing area, production area. So I'm just going to show a couple of images of these. So the image on the left is on the roof. So these are all raised beds, and some of them are productive and some of them are more horticultural. And then this is the courtyard garden below, which is looked into from all of the communal spaces. But the planting, just the simple loveliness of the planting, the opportunity to see that change through the seasons, just adds so much to this project, which has already won. It's only opened this year, but it's already won many awards for the holistic approach to binding plants and landscape into quite a dense little urban project. And I think that's my time up, so I'll stop there.
Andrew, really, really impressive work that you've done. We all know and understand being in nature, and what you've done to create these amazing spaces is quite amazing. Awesome work. Thank you for sharing your work. Now I'm pleased to introduce Ton Muller from the Municipality of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Ton is the head landscape architect at the Municipality of Amsterdam. His work revolves around public urban landscapes that are tuned to nature. He is working as a landscape designer, green supervisor, and a planting expert for a wide range of complex green urban projects. His work is rooted in a Dutch tradition of nature-based greening and planting design. Working for the City of Amsterdam for over 25 years, Ton has experimented with different ways of creating green environments, from strategy to designing urban plantings to create more livable spaces. He is pioneering new habitat-based approaches to planting in the public realm and the built environment to create resilient plant communities He collaborates with urban planners, ecologists, and architects. His work brings together themes like biodiversity, climate adaptation, water management, community building, and maintenance. Tone, I'm really pleased to have you join us today.
Thank you all for coming out. I'd like to share some of the things that we are doing in Amsterdam to work on a livable future with all the different things that are so important to create this livable future. So starting working at the municipality in the city, it's really much about the long-term ideas of how we deal with these challenges. So we have a green agenda or a green vision, which deals with all the important subjects like climate change, the decline of biodiversity, our parks, the health, physical and mental health, neighborhood spaces, and the connections between all these different spaces. So this is like an overall a vision that we have, and all the projects are made from this overall vision. And I will just talk about a few important things from this whole story. Very important is that we try to create habitat for everything that is alive, everything that is alive in this city. So it's not just for human beings, but also for plants and animals. So whenever we design a space or I work on a project, this is the main idea that is always at the horizon. So it is about everything that is alive. And important in designing these spaces are looking at the different values. And there's three important ones. That is the user value, the way that we use these spaces as human beings to relax, to play and to sport, or to barbecue, or all kind of things that we do as human beings in these green spaces. The second one is the sustainability value, which is very much about climate and biodiversity. And the third one is the experience value. And that's something that I will talk about today. So the experience of green, of plants, of nature, and how important it is for us to recognize a place, this sense of place, to see the seasons, to feel nature, and how important it is for our mental health. And so I will show examples of projects where this experience of nature and plants is at the forefront. So how do we use plants to create a sense of place? And plants are the most important material that we use to create this livable future. A starting point is this looking at nature. So what we do is to try to create habitats, like I said before, for everything that is alive, and especially when it comes to plants. What kind of habitats do we make in a city that we can relate to places in nature? So whether they are sunny or more shady, whether they are dry or wet, like in this example of a planting that was made in one of the parks in the area of an old factory. Before I dive into a few projects, I'd like to say something about this sense of place of Amsterdam connected to plants. We are a city full of ohm trees. So there's like 80,000 ohm trees in Amsterdam. So they are very typical for a city, and they are everywhere in our streets, in our parks, on our squares. And we have a wide range of ohm trees. Also like very new ones that are resistant to Dutch elm disease. So they are very typical when it comes to identity of plants in a city like Amsterdam. And the second thing I like to show is just, is more like a spatial element, is the fact that we allow the people of Amsterdam to create their own front gardens and vertical gardens, and we allow them to make it in the public footpath. So this, in front of every building, you're allowed to make a front garden of 30 or 50 centimeters wide, and you can put in your own plants and your climbing plants. And especially when you're in the heart of Amsterdam, you see it like everywhere. So this is like something that the freedom that we give, and we are trying to find ways of giving more freedom to the people of Amsterdam to help and to create their own green city. So this is something that is typical about Amsterdam, just these two parts, these old trees and this front garden. Then I'd like to show some of the projects that I've been working on in the last years, different sites that we really transformed into green spaces. And the first one is the Ollie Plein in front of one of the main stations, Sloterdijk. And this used to be a place for trams and buses. So it looked like this. And we made a green space out of it. So this is what we made out of it. And what's interesting, I tried to bring the nearby wider landscape into this area. Sorry. So what I tried to do is to bring the wider landscape to the entrance of the station. And before this was an area where there was just offices, and now we started building housing also here. So it is like the heart of this, a new heart of this area where the green, where the plants are the main identity. And I use plants that are like Molinia and Amelanchier and Crataegus that grow in this nearby landscape. So by bringing these plants from the landscape into the city, we try to bring this identity of landscape into this densely built urban area. And we also incorporated on the left side, you see the bikes, which are very typical for Amsterdam, just to incorporate this bike parking into this whole green area. And what is very important that like all the seasons, the different kind of plants have been brought in for all the seasons. Like this is in spring with a layer of bulbs and perennials. And it is like more like an open meadow kind of space with scattered trees. This is in summer, so like the colors change like every month. So this is in full summer around this time of the year, where it's very colorful. Changing into autumn when the grasses like Molinia and Panicum come up with the Rudbeckia. And it's interesting to see what's going on here. There's some cafes, there's terraces. People even do yoga there now. And well, like I showed the first picture, the way that it looked when it was still like just a place for traffic. So you see the people come out literally to find a place and to do things in this new green space. A second project is in the heart of our business district, Zuidas, and this is a city garden that we made. So it's surrounded by these, by mostly offices. There's also a school here. And this is a bit like the Ollie Plein, a meadow of perennials, mostly perennials with some scattered shrubs, changing over the seasons. So it's very much about experiencing a bit of nature and seasons through the year. And it's a very sunny side, and there's two like small parts that are shady where I created a grove with Cuboteria, which is this simple planting of carex and hydrangea petiolaris. But you see what the effect is like with this combining these plants. So it's just a combination of two very different strategies. Then a project on top of a parking garage. This used to be just a lawn. There's a lot of housing here and a school. So we transformed this into this planting where grasses are the main ingredients. So it's the Cislaria, Calamagrostis, and Miscanthus. And these grasses take you like through the year, and they are they create the identity for this place where there's two playgrounds incorporated. So in this case, it's the mass of grasses that create the identity of this space. And then a new park that we made on the side of an old factory. There's still some remnants of the factory, like the water tower that you see. There was already a small park that belonged to the factory with some older trees. And I added, well, we created the park with playgrounds, with a beautiful fence around. And then these layers of new planting were added, like new trees, evergreen trees, fruit trees, and these flowering trees like Prunus yedoensis in spring. And the next layer is the shrubs, so evergreen shrubs were added on like a carpet of perennials, and that part of the perennials are in sun, that's a mixed planting, and part of the perennials are under the older trees, so that's a patchwork of ground covering, shade plants, and like in all projects, bulbs were involved. And because it's like in this mix, it's just like a mix of 5 different species of perennials, but when they flower, there's thousands of them. So you have this effect. And actually in all these projects, I try to create a wider landscape. So it's not about creating a garden or gardening, it's a city landscape made with plants. So it's like continuous, because it's not really like in a garden with a wall around it, but this is a wider landscape. So also the way that I use plants are from this larger scale. And they can be very, the impact can be very big because of the mass of plants. And this is the patchwork under the existing trees. And then after 4 years, this landscape is growing, and all these layers of shrubs and perennials and trees create this landscape with this own identity. And the other part of the park is the lawn where people play and sport and barbecue. And also there I put in these ovals with bulbs. So even the bulbs like this, because of these shapes, people go there, children pick flowers, people have a picnic there. So even the way that you use bulbs like in a lawn can have this impact of creating identity. Then another example of a skate park. This is the biggest skate park that we have in the Netherlands. It's in Amsterdam. It was made on a hill. And I just put this simple planting of Calamagrostis, so this field of masses of grass surrounded with the skate park. So it is creating the identity around the skate park. Then I'd like to show, this is one of the first big housing projects that we are working on, densely built houses, and the green space in between. So what we tried to do here is to create like a forest as kind of planting with trees and shrubs. So it is shady because of the high-rise buildings that we use, and this is what it looks like now. So it is this lush green area because people live here, they don't have a garden, they have maybe a small balcony. So it is trying to create this lush green world in contrast to the high dense buildings that are there. So you really feel kind of immersed in this green side and really making these forest kind of habitats and always made with partly with native plants, but also non-native plants. So it's a mix of plants that grow in the same kind of conditions. And the last project that I'd like to show is not really a park, but it is a street. It is a rain garden or swale, and it's one of many that we are doing now. Because the greening of our street and the identity is a very important a part of the greening strategy. And this is a way of making rain gardens, and not in the classical way of having a street with 2 rows of trees, but having more on one, in this case, on one side of the street to have an area which is 7 meters wide and to create a habitat in that rain garden using perennials, bulbs, shrubs, and trees. So this whole palette of plants that grow together and create a kind of habitat which is very resilient also to drought and heat. That's what we found in the last few years. So plants grow together like they would in nature, being very sustainable, and also an important thing in a city like Amsterdam, and if you try to create greening on a wider scale, is that these are projects with low maintenance. That's the only way we can do it on a larger scale. And this is the last picture, of course, talking about identity in Amsterdam. We are well known for tulips, and so this is in the Tulip Festival in Amsterdam. And this is an example of how we still are proud of the tulips like in the old days. Thank you.
Thank you, Ton. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I also want to thank you, having been a public servant for the bulk of my career. I really appreciate and understand the value of people who serve in your role and the impact on a city that you make, the work that you do make. So thank you so much for sharing your work and your commitment to the City of Amsterdam for so many years. So I'd like to facilitate a Q&A. If you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A, not in the chat, and I will approach those. If we can also have Andrew join, put his camera on and his unmute himself, because we've got questions for both Tone and Andrew. So Andrew, just to start off with you, it's always really exciting to hear and see amazing projects and amazing work that you and Tone have done. But I think, as we all know, we also, through that amazing work, sometimes it's a slog and there's challenges that you face in that process. And I'm curious, Andrew, and Tone, I'll ask you this question as well. But, what were some significant challenges, whether it was the Bay of Singapore, the Tower of London? What were some significant challenges in those projects you had to overcome?
Well, there's many, many, many challenges to I'm just off the top of my head, for Gardens by the Bay, for instance. I mean, the procurement of plants from all over the world in this very short time scale, to develop the collection, was a massive challenge, and that was taken on by the National Park Board of Singapore, and they sent teams out to every part of the world and managed the organization of moving plants halfway across the world to end up in Singapore, and that was logistically amazing. From a technical point of view, I mean, lots of things we were doing there had not been done before. The cooling system for the conservatories was an innovative way of thinking about how do we cool efficiently in the tropics, using a range of technologies that hadn't been put together in the same way. So both of those represent teamwork, I think, in terms of what to fight the challenges. You need to have fantastic teams and have great people working around you. Briefly on the Tower of London, I mean, the interesting challenge there was the microclimate, which became a bit of a surprise to everybody in terms of we knew that the environments around each side of the tower would be different, but we didn't know how different until we got well into the project. And everything turned out well in the end because we managed to sort of understand enough about what we needed to do. But it was quite interesting to think about the incredibly cold wind coming off the Thames in the early spring when you wanted the germination. And then it became incredibly hot as you got into the summer. So all these sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your point, every project has significant challenges, and it's the team of people that creatively work together with an outcome, with a really positive outcome that really makes a difference. So thanks for sharing that. And Tone, you're a project-based as well, but you're also managing this environment of a city long-term strategy. So what are some of the challenges? The rest of us in the world look at Amsterdam as a model city, but I am sure you face your own challenges there as well. I'm curious, what are some of those challenges that you face as you try to implement this long-term strategy for the city?
Well, like with the first project that I showed, the Oli plan, it was still a challenge to convince like the urban planners to make, because we were always talking about the square, because it's like a square in front of a station, to green it, and then, well, it was the time they were thinking like, but that's a park, and I really had to explain them that, well, you can call it a park or a green square, but it's so important. And there was a problem with rain already then, like 10 years ago. So there was a rainproof problem. But it took a while to get them off the idea that it could be a green square, so that's much easier now in the last 10 years because of the change of climate helped us landscape architects. It's easier to convince politicians or urban planners or architects that we should green. So that's much easier now. But well, one of the things I kind of went along with creating these plantings, and until the moment that it became a problem with maintenance. So I show some projects, especially with the sunny meadows, that they need maintenance with people that have enough knowledge, and that's a big challenge at the moment. So my designs at the moment are a bit simpler, and I use more woody plants. That's also because of climate. But the maintenance is an ongoing challenge, I would say, to have enough money from the city to do the maintenance, but also the right people. It is a challenge to find people and to find people with the right knowledge too. And I always, like since a few years, I say it's no longer about traditional maintaining, but it's more about guiding. So we have more succession. It's more like looking at nature. But it's still a challenge to find the right people to do this guiding. So it is, so those are kind of challenges. And sometimes it's about finding the right plants. Although we are going forward as a city to have growing contracts with nurseries. We see we have like a new palette of plants with trees and shrubs that grow well with this new climate. And we want to be back in charge to grow them ourselves, because we always ask the contractors, and then they didn't have the plants. So now we are going back to having these growing contracts with nurseries, which is a very important thing. So those are kind of challenges, but I know I should not be complaining because.
Yeah, and I don't hear you complaining, but the reality is that you do face challenges, and
Yes.
it's about working through them. Absolutely, absolutely. So I have a question from Jennifer Dunn. Hi, Jen. Good to see you. Tom, this is for you. In these public spaces, how do you manage? Actually, here we go. Just another offshoot of your response. How do you manage maintenance, and have you had to upskill maintenance staff to handle additional planting, specific needs for each area? Jen works for a cash draft local authority and would love to do this, but no, in their current way of working, they would struggle with that. So any thoughts or suggestions about how you do that and what you have to do?
So it is, well, like I said before, it is a challenge. I learned that it's very important from the start of when you start designing to communicate with the maintenance staff, to take them along and to communicate with them, especially when it's about new plants or new way of planting, like mixed plantings. It's very important to do it together with them. And sometimes it's a good thing to because we often work with contractors who make the plan, to have the maintenance staff being involved in this planting, this making the project. So they are involving them from day one is very important. And also sometimes visiting other places, other projects, maybe in another city, just to see an example, or have them talk to maintenance people that do the maintenance in these other projects, so they can share experiences. So these are just a few things, and also I have to admit my plantings at the beginning 10 years ago were too complex. So I was a bit fooled by the wonderful things that I saw on this planet, and I thought it would be possible in like, because all the projects that I do are really public, and it's public money. So there is yeah, it's a different space. Yeah, so it's a combination of those things. And in the meantime, we also have to move forward because the world is changing. So we need other plants in other ways. But
Absolutely. And, everything you've said, I resonate with my work in the public sector, bringing maintenance staff along, working in partnership with them, helping them see other ways of doing it and learning from others. Really critical pieces of the puzzle. So I completely concur with you. Andrew, I've got a question from you from Enrico Flor. Keeping in mind that extensive documentation is needed to build a heavy plant infrastructure, for example, at Gardens by the Bay, which platform did you use to make all this possible? AutoCAD, MicroStation, Revit? Just curious, Enrico's looking for what platform you use. How receptive, and again, every municipal structure is slightly different, so this may have not been an issue, but were there challenges with municipal engineers in Amsterdam of privately led planting within public right of ways in Amsterdam?
No, and this is privately, no, not really.
Okay, all right, yeah, and again, every entity handles private-public partnerships slightly differently, so it's not an issue in Amsterdam.
No.
Okay, Andrew, welcome back. Glad
Yeah,
that you're
what
back.
happened?
So I don't know. So here's I'll give you the question again. Keeping in mind that extensive documentation is needed to build plant-heavy infrastructure such as Gardens by the Bay. Enrico's looking for, what platform did you use to make this possible? Did you use AutoCAD, MicroStation, Revit?
Well, if just go back to Gardens by the Bay, that was at the time that was pretty much all AutoCAD with some of the three-dimensional pieces on Rhino and some very clever computational analysis for the structures that were informed into that. And today, I mean, most of the world is going towards Revit and BIM modeling, I think, for lots of the projects, and we're trying to catch up in terms of the world of landscape. Just going back 5 years, Revit was not at all a sort of a friendly tool for landscape, but it's getting a lot better. And we supplement that with a lot of Rhino modeling and Grasshopper, and we still have the AutoCAD as a sort of a backstop of how to. It's extraordinarily rich in terms of the process, because I mean hand-drawn sketches developed into 3D models in 2 minutes. It's extraordinary what we can do these days. And going back to Ton's point about complexity, I mean, we have to be careful that we don't overcomplicate the way we do everything and the way we procure everything, because I think that is a danger at the moment, is that systems are just getting in the way of delivering something amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that end, I have one last question for both of you. We've got about a minute left, so if you could just give a quick answer to this question. Talk about simplicity and not overcomplicating, but a really important element is the public's feedback on these kinds of projects that are going to impact cities for long terms. How do you both capture feedback from people about the spaces you design, their experiences with plants, what they come in contact with, both in terms of the design, but also post-design and implementation? Ton, I'll start with you, and then Andrew, I'm curious to hear your response as well.
What we do, like every project that I showed, is being done in participation with the people. So it's like we have like the whole neighborhood is part of the design process.
Yeah.
And then and on some projects afterwards, when it's there we do ask people what they think. Not always, but it's but mostly like with all these projects, there is an immense positive reaction. And the most important is that the people who do the maintenance there, they tell us that whenever they work there, that people give them these positive reactions all the time. So that's
that's great. Andrew, anything different?
Well, just in terms, I mean, evaluation. I mean, we've worked. You've seen 2 or 3 of the projects there that have been very public and very high profile, and basically you just see what the results are on social media and what people are leaving messages about, and most of it is incredibly positive. Just thinking Gardens by the Bay, it's had 110 million people actually physically visit the garden since 2012. And I don't know how many hundreds of millions of recordings or photographs or memos have been put onto the world of the internet to say, to reinforce what an amazing place it is.
Absolutely. Well, again, Ton and Andrew, thank you so much. And for those of you who are attending, just a quick wrap up for me, and then I'll turn it over to Frankie. both AIPH and World Urban Parks are great international organizations to learn more about and get engaged in ways in an international environment of all of this work. And both AIPH and World Urban Parks are going to be part of the Future Green Cities Conference in Utrecht in September. So in the chat are links to both World Urban Parks website, but also to the Future Green Cities Conference that will be in Utrecht in September. Encourage you, all attendees, to check both of those out. So Frankie, back to you.
Thank you ever so much, Jayne. Yes, definitely have a look at those events. Thank you for joining us today for this AIPH Green City Briefing. We have heard and seen the incredible way plants create, transform, and inspire. I would like to thank both of our speakers, Andrew and Tom, and our MC, Jayne, for their fantastic insights and wonderful conversation. Thank you. Some of those images were just beautiful. To the audience, thank you so much for joining us today, and do be sure to join the rest of the briefing series. Next up in July, we will be discussing the role of policy in creating fantastic urban green spaces. This session has been recorded and it will be available on the AIPH YouTube channel shortly, so please do share it with your colleagues. Finally, I'd like to once again thank our sponsors of the briefing series. There we are, the wonderful Worshipful Company of Gardeners. Until next time, thank you and goodbye from me and the AIPH Green City team.